Thank you so much for doing this and joining us. Um, First things first, the optics of this visit. How should one look at it and say, "Oh wow, this is great," because that's the message that's going across that it's going to be the first Indian Prime Minister to be invited to the White House within the first 30 days of a new administration. That says a lot.
It does actually. I think when you put it that way, I didn't even think about the first 30 days. I look at it as that he is the fourth world leader to visit the president so far. And they had a phone call, I believe, within the first day in which the president had won. These are all good signs that the current administration, the Trump administration, has a favorable and positive view of India and the prime minister. I mean, the Indians did not hold back to show that they wanted to start working with the new Trump administration right away. The Trump administration could have said, wait, come in 6 months, come in 8 months. But President Trump on Air Force One said that I want to have Prime Minister Modi come within the first 2 months. That
Yeah.
famous verbal say, "Oh, I think he's coming next month." That's great. It is all positive.
Okay. The transactional approach, is what we've heard. This administration is going to be a little different from the one that we had in the past 4 years. We've seen India making some concessions already in its budget, whether it comes to reducing tariffs on Harley Davidson, something that, Donald Trump has talked about a lot in the past. I probably should say 6, 7, 8 years. How do you see this? Like, where can India be doing things that keeps India in Trump's good books?
Well, I mean, there's going to be some challenges, but you have to have a seat at the table in order to resolve challenges. That's
Good.
why with the prime minister coming very early, you establish this rapport, and then you tackle some of these issues. Tariffs are going to be a tough challenge for India. India has some of the highest tariffs in the world, and even the president's economic advisor noted that earlier this week on Monday, that India is a high tariff country. I believe the Indians have already said, the finance minister said last week that they would look at trying to reduce some of those tariffs. So right there, you're seeing a working relationship. How do we make this work? I think they offset some of the views on India and tariffs by energy cooperation, defense cooperation. The president has talked about drill, baby, drill. The
Hmm.
Indians have said, we like that. And so you might see some agreements, some very high level agreements on that. I think you'll see some civil nuclear cooperation. You may even see some coal cooperation, some cooperation between the two countries on advancing coal technology. So I think, and defense, can't leave
Defense.
out defense. There's going to be some very interesting, hopefully, defense deals that they're going to be working towards. I just want to stress one thing. Uh, the Trump administration is still filling out, and they've been dealing with the conflict and the war in the Gulf. They're dealing with the Ukraine issue. You can see that they're releasing Americans
Yep.
that are being held hostage. So I think this is great that they're coming. I'm glad that they're having a conversation on key issues. But my expectations of big announcements might be very, I'm keeping them very middle of the road.
Okay. From America's perspective, and this is very important, China has been a concern. President Biden called it, strategic competition, and all that stuff. Trump has he swung from one side to the other. He said things, really bad things about China, to now saying he would love to see it and work with Xi Jinping on certain things. India has had I probably should say, a misfortune of being seen through the prism of Pakistan up until I'll probably say should say early 2000s, and now I think India is seen to the prism of counterbalancing China. What can we expect on those lines? You think Trump will probably take a hard line when Prime Minister Modi is in town, especially when it comes to uh, looking at security threat perception from China, competition, semiconductors? Like, how would that shape up?
Uh, I don't see much of a change from the Biden foreign policy to the Trump foreign policy when it comes to China. And I think their support of India, as India has to deal with some very difficult issues with China. So I don't see. I think of it this way: if you notice, the President Trump has a pattern as to how he talks about countries. Before he actually does something, he gets very harsh. He puts a lot of harsh words out there. Then, as part of his negotiating style, he will say, "Okay, let's meet.
Yeah,
Let's get to the table."
yeah,
His style is very different, I think, than some other presidents, which is he's willing to meet with anybody. He's willing to meet with anybody. He's willing to talk to anybody. He's willing to negotiate with anybody. So I'm not surprised that he changed his tone because he needs the Chinese to come to the table to talk. If he continues harsh language, as you know very well, a lot of foreign policy is driven by a domestic agenda. So, the Chinese, the Indians, whoever it may be, the Russians, they're not going to come and meet with President Trump or the Trump administration if it's perceived back home that they're getting beaten up. So it's all part of a strategy that the president deploys. I think they are very sympathetic towards India and its problems with China, especially around the border. Look, I think that the Trump administration is probably equally concerned about what's happening in Bangladesh, what's happening in Pakistan, China. And if you're the United States and India, you have to worry that 60% of Chinese defense exports go to South Asia. And I would probably bet India is not buying those Chinese defense equipment items. So where are they going? So there's a lot of strategic convergence between the two. And I think they'll have a lot to talk about. I don't think they'll make any real public announcements. Now, remember,
Well,
Biden was also pretty strong on the joint statement.
yeah.
Remember that amazing joint statement during the state
60
visit?
pages was it?
So it was like 72 items that was being
Yeah,
discussed. That was amazing. Actually, you know what? I think that's also going to be a challenge for the Indians. How do you rebrand all of that?
yeah,
So that way the Trump administration feels that it's their own.
yeah.
And so they covered a lot. And now you have to make like the feel like the Trump administration is now dictating its policy. So that's actually going to be another challenge for the Indians and the Americans. How do you rebrand everything that the Biden administration has done?
One last question, Cap. You brought up Bangladesh. India obviously had different views from what the Biden administration had. Minister and the president of Bangladesh and security in South Asia, especially because India does not think that, whatever happened in transpired in Bangladesh was done democratically. So, I mean, you think that would feature?
I think so, especially in light of what came out with USAID and the way that it's being received in India and the support for certain NGOs and nonprofits in Bangladesh. And I would suspect that they will raise that privately and discuss it. There's no question that it has to come up. Look, as you know, a lot of my work is focusing on India's economy. How does it become the second largest economy in the world in by 2047? One of the key things that India needs is stable borders. And
Hmm.
if it does not have if Bangladesh and Pakistan are not stable countries, India's economy cannot grow to the levels that it needs to grow. So India needs to work with the United States to stabilize the Bangladesh economy, help them think about job creation and work together. So regional stability is extremely important in this conversation.
Okay. All right. We'll keep talking with you during the visit and after the visit, Cap. Thank you so much for doing this on a freezing cold morning here in Washington, D.C. We'll look forward to speaking with you again. Thank you.
My pleasure. I look forward to it as well.
Take care, Cap. Bye.
Bye bye.